Though Carter's people were convinced that Jenrette simply got the wrong information and thus brought the embarrassment upon himself, they would rather fall on their sword or eat crow. They didn't want to give the story legs. It was politically better to do this and apologize for the inconvenience than to let the story become any more damaging to the larger message. Blaming Jenrette would distract from Carter's message of selling the presidential luxury in the name of simplicity and economy. Pushing headstrong symbolic gestures with major political implications, Carter learned the hard way that inside politics that he campaigned about proved impossible to avoid. Unfortunately for Carter, the Jenrette fiasco proved to be only one hurdle, if you will, in his campaign to undo the stigma of his office. On May 24, 1977, Secretary of Defense Harold Brown informed Carter that the winning bid of Leisure Craft's Thomas Aquinas Malloy was held up pending the Department of the Interior investigation as to determine the nature of the sequoia and whether or not it qualified as a historic monument. The DOI letter claimed they never signed off on the sale. Though Malloy secured the winning bid, it turned out Carter had not jumped through all the right hoops. The DOI's main concern was that the boat would fall into nefarious use. In the DOI's defense, Larry Flint did bid on the boat, though Larry Flint swore he planned to use it for a purely historic value. If you trust Larry Flint, well, okay. Carter's people clarified that the original statute governing the sale of real property was designed to separate items of historical significance from those merely of historical interest, and the sequoia fell into the latter category. Hence, it could be sold. And eventually the sale was finalized to Malloy, but some of Carter's austerity message got lost in a due process story. Press coverage gravitated to the story of how the boat came to be sold and the administration's follies in doing so, rather than the underlying message of why the sale occurred to begin with. Judith Martin and other White House press corps reporters spun the story into an evaluation of Carter's beltway savvy at the expense of austerity and conciliatory efforts. The public also reacted overwhelmingly negative to Carter's gesture of austerity. The clearest example of this was a letter sent to the White House. It came from Dr. James Donnell, the Wichita, Kansas office of the Board of City Commissioners. He wrote to President Carter asking for, quote, a reprieve for that grand old lady who served this country well, end quote. Donnell resented the president's intention to sell the boat and the appearance that the transaction was done surreptitiously. Donnell concluded that the president sold the boat to, quote, make the presidency and its trappings a bit more human, understandable, and approachable to the people of America, end quote, but countered that there were better ways to save money than to sell off the sequoia. Donnell accused Carter of overlooking the distinguished history of the boat in a rush to, quote, expunge the word yacht from presidential parlance. Donnell also sent his letter to his local congressman, one Representative Daniel Glickman, Democrat from Kansas, making what could be only seen perhaps as a rookie mistake. The freshman Democrat spoke out against the newly elected president and leader of his party. Beyond just forwarding the letter to the White House, Glickman took Donnell's case to the floor of Congress, calling on it to preserve the sequoia. While the congressman applauded the president's frugality, he believed the yacht sale was a ridiculous move and that Carter was commercializing history and selling off a vital part of America's past. Deputy Special Assistant for the Administration, Valerio Giannini, responded to Donnell offering solace that the new owners agreed to, quote, the maintenance and preservation of the vessel, thus assuring at least partial perpetuity of her dignity and history. The Carter administration tried its best to balance the goals while not alienating constituents or members of Congress. Now, time doesn't permit me to do this here, but a similar situation unfolded in the Senate. Another singular letter was forwarded to a senator, and one senator took that case to the floor. Now, many members were aware of Carter's decision, and many more had bid on the presidential yacht, but only two serving in Congress spoke up on the issue. Now, one could say it's simply there were more important issues on the agenda, and they were dividing their time likewise, but I think there's another way to look at this. Many members of Congress did share Carter's vision for a tame executive and cooperation amongst the branches, perhaps even a more austere presidency. However, veteran members of Congress and the Washington establishment recognized the political capital the vote garnered inside the Beltway. Since it was often members of Congress wooed on the presidential yacht, the vote represented by extension one of their perquisites as well. Nonetheless, members of Congress did not want to appear to be in favor of government bloat or in favor of ostentatious luxury, so they kept their mouths shut. Ultimately, Carter's goal to frame himself as a common man president, making conscious decisions not to repeat the imperial follies of his predecessors, met with mixed results. However, he did succeed in removing presidential yachts from the arsenal of presidential perquisites. Ronald Reagan learned this lesson the hard way early in his presidency. He just floated the idea of potentially, possibly, reacquiring a presidential yacht, and he was shot down and punished for it in the press. But as the Reagan years ended, and the Bush years and the Clinton years developed, an ulterior or unintended consequence developed. This was pointed out in April 17, 1988, by Washington Post reporter Ken Ringel. He criticized the sale as, quote, one of the least enlightened moments of the Jimmy Carter presidency. As proof, Ringel noted that Carter's motivation was, quote, purportedly for economic reasons. But since 1977, presidents have retreated to St. Thomas, Martha's Vineyard, Kennebunkport. They still up on the water. But number one, they fly there in Air Force One, costing what he said $26,000 an hour to operate. And secondly, they go out on boats, most often rented, which are also costing taxpayers money. Thus, ironically, Carter's maneuver designed to save money and reduce what he saw as ostentatious luxury proved to have the opposite effect. Without an official yacht, presidents since Carter have turned to other outlets for their pleasure. And these alternatives have proven equally lavish, but often come at a much greater cost to the taxpayers. In the end, if we were to tally up the political victories and political losses, it may not bear a clear result in favor of Carter and his austerity campaign. Also, in light of Ringel's revelations, perhaps the pragmatic and economic legacy of Carter's actions are tainted as well. However, the symbolism in the initial gesture remains a bold move to counter the previously prevailing negative image of the president. I argue that in light of the tarnished presidential image, Carter's battles counted more than his victories. Thank you.